Hey study buddies, welcome back. Today, we're going to cover probably one of the most important discoveries of behavior analysis since Skinner's initial work, stimulus equivalence. Now, you may shudder at the phrase stimulus equivalence, and hopefully today I can help reverse any aversive conditioning you may have gone through. But this is actually a really cool concept. It explains so much about learning, creativity, novelty, and how we can learn new things without being directly taught. This groundbreaking discovery was made by Murray Sidman back in the early 1970s. He initially was researching reading acquisition. So before teaching sight words, he taught identification of pictures. So when he would give the audio stimulus cat, his participants would point at the corresponding photo of a cat. And then he switched it up. Instead of pictures, he started using written sight words. So same thing, he would give the audio stimulus cat, and they would select the written word cat. And then he did a test to see if they developed a relationship between the written word and the picture, which he had never taught directly together. They were always taught separately in completely different teaching instruction, teaching trials. But he found that his participants did develop what are called derived relations. And that just means they were never directly taught the relationship between the picture of a cat and the written word cat, but they were able to derive that relation through this stimulus equivalence phenomenon. So I always find the best way to teach stimulus equivalence is to actually have you experience it yourself. So I'm going to do my best to recreate the experience of the three different levels of stimulus equivalence, and hopefully it's beneficial. I am using Chinese Mandarin symbols, I believe. I'm really sorry if you're, if this is like the language you write in and speak. Let me know if I get any of it wrong. I tried to do my research diligently, but I really tried to use stimuli that at least students in the United States were a little more unfamiliar with, because it helps understand, it helps you learn stimulus equivalence if you are using stimulus that you are unfamiliar with. So that's why I'm using these symbols. So reflexivity. This is basic matching. So like identical matching. So I'm using this one stimuli down here. This is called the sample stimulus. So this is the initial SD I give my clients, or in any of these teaching trials. I'm going to give a sample stimulus, and the role of the learner is to take the sample stimulus and compare it to the, I always forget what this is called, comparison stimulus. Dang it, I knew I'd forget it. I knew I was supposed to write it down. Sample stimulus, I'm going to call it comparison stimulus. I might have to edit this in post. Dang, I hate forgetting terminologies like this. Let's pause this recording. All right, so it is comparison stimulus. So I'm given the sample stimuli, we compare it to the comparison stimuli, and the response I'm looking for is for you to match it to the correct stimuli. So, example, the sample stimuli is the same as this stimuli, so the comparison stimuli over here. So these are the same. I'm teaching you that. So directly teaching that, that's the relationship that you learn. This is exactly the same as this. This is one of the earlier skills that people tend to develop when they're growing up. It's pretty easy to, for some people, typically developing people, to be able to match identical items together. All right, so that's reflexivity. Literally, same thing. Okay, symmetry is with two different stimuli, but you're teaching that they mean the same thing. So Now my sample stimuli is the word love, just the written word love. And now you're supposed to match it to the comparison stimuli. So which one is the same as the written word love? I have not taught you this. So if you know the answer already, you likely know what all these symbols mean. If you have a guess at which one it might be, it could also be because of your learning history with lectures and things like that. But I technically have not taught it to you yet, so I'm going to directly teach it to you right now. The written word love is the same as this symbol here in the middle. So look at that symbol, take a second, look at its features, and then remember that it means the same thing as the written word love. They are the same. All right, now I'm going to test you on something I haven't directly taught you. Now I'm giving you this symbol, and I want you to tell me what it is in the comparison stimuli. Which one is the correct answer? So again, if you're a typically developing human adult, it will be easier for you to do this because this skill has been in your repertoire for a really long time. But this is the correct answer, love. So that's symmetry. So let's look at what we've kind of gone over so far in our relationships here. So I've directly taught you the written word love is the same as this. When I give you the sample stimuli love, you have learned directly from me. I've prompted you with the stimuli, you engaged in the response, and hopefully I reinforced you that yes, this is the correct response. Now when I test you on it the opposite way and I give you this sample stimuli, I didn't have to teach you that this was the correct answer. Like by teach, I mean, I didn't wait for your response and I didn't have to prompt your response and then provide you with reinforcement. You're able to immediately go to independent with your responding. So that's what this dotted line indicates. If you see that in other pictures, that's usually what it indicates, is that it was not a direct trial, not directly taught. The person was deriving that relationship. So that's the relationship we've learned so far. Now I'm going to add a new relationship. So now we still have the written word love, but now I'm going to teach you the vocal sound, I. And again, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that to those of you who speak this language. I highly encourage you to send me a video of how to correctly pronounce this. But I. So I'm directly teaching you I means love. And so you should be able to derive love means I the opposite way. So we could test that. This is a testing scenario. So if I give you the sample stimulus I, you can point to love. So again, this should be an untaught, like I didn't directly teach this to you. Again, this is supposed to be just kind of like a test. So here's another one, another test. So I'm not teaching you this time, just giving you a stimuli and seeing if you get it right. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to look through the stimuli and come up with your response. All right, I'm going to give you the answer now. This was the answer. So if you were able to select this one all by yourself and I didn't teach it to you at all, you got it correct. Congratulations. You have the most complex learning skill in stimulus equivalence. That's called transitivity. Because what I did was I directly taught you love and this symbol, and I directly taught you I and love. And those are the only two things I taught you. And you were able to derive independently the reverse of both of those symmetry relationships. But you also developed this transitivity relationship. So I never taught you with I or the symbol. I never put those two together in a teaching trial for you. I only did a teaching trial this way and this way. And you were able to come up with that new relationship all by yourself. So now you should have all three of these equivalent to each other. What I mean by that is they all mean the same thing. They represent the same thing. So love, I, and this symbol, all mean the same thing to you. So they represent what's called an equivalence class. They all mean the same thing. And what an equivalence class is when there's a group of stimuli that all represent the same thing, they all are equivalent. And what's cool about equivalence classes is if I change a relationship or create a new relationship with one member of that group, it will change that relationship for all the other ones. So let me give you an example. Let's say I teach you that this symbol, doing this sign, means I. They mean exactly the same thing. That's what I teach you. So if ever I do this, I prompt you to give me the sound, you can say I. Now, without directly teaching you any other relationship, what'll happen is you will derive that relationship with the other members of this class. And now what also has happened is your class has expanded. So now all four of these are part of the same equivalence class. So you can add things to classes, you can take things away. There's other types of equivalence class expansion out there too. I can also make relationships, instead of saying things are the same, I can make a relationship where I'm saying this means the opposite. So you know that if I say hate is the opposite of love, well, now you can also derive that hate is the opposite of this symbol. Hate is also the opposite of I. Hate is also the opposite of this sign. So that's, you know, the relationship that I established with one member of this equivalence class now adopts that relationship for everything within that class. So I hope that was helpful in understanding a little bit more about stimulus equivalence classes, and what it means to expand an equivalence class. There's going to be more to come. This is just the first almost introductory video of equivalence classes. We will have follow-up videos that dive specifically into how to use equivalence classes in your teaching as a BCBA, how they incorporate into everyday life, and whatever else you are interested in learning about equivalence and stimulus equivalence. It's a really cool concept. I think what just gets confusing is which direction teaching is going. And I think often we are taught with examples like bike or cat or dog, and we all already have our equivalence classes made up of those because we've learned those since we were 2 years old. So it's really hard to understand the concept if you already have relationships with those stimuli. So I try to use stimuli that you're not as familiar with to help you understand, like, oh, I'm learning this completely new thing and I didn't have to learn it. I think what also makes this harder to learn is if you're not so great at math, because this is a basic math concept, that if you find out A equals B and B equals C, then you already know that A must equal C, even though it was never directly stated. It's just math. Math and logic, that's also a logic question. So it's the same thing, like that's how we learn. So the way this relates also to kind of novelty, new behaviors, creativity, is that this happens with kids all the time. Like I can teach, I've actually seen this happen. One of my professor's daughters, she was 3 years old. So she was directly taught two different things. She was directly taught that a farm is where food is grown. So it's where things grow. And then she was also taught that those weird sticks with the propellers on them that are out in California, they're all over the hills here in Northern California. They're called windmills. She learned that that was called a wind farm. So she learned these two different relationships, that this place that has these weird wind things, it's called a wind farm. And then she also learned that farms are where things grow, she on her own derived a completely new relationship, and she thought that wind farms is where wind was grown. So all the wind you feel every day comes from a wind farm. So obviously that's not where wind comes from. Wind comes from differing temperatures, higher and lower pressure. But you can easily see how children can create these relations in their head based on two different relations that they learned. So she came up with her own transitivity example. So again, this is a very important concept for learning, especially because this is how humans especially learn so quickly, especially with our verbal skills. So we're able to teach this means this and this means this. And then you can derive tons of different relationships. You can see how quickly expanding an equivalence class can become more and more complicated because this sign language symbol can also mean something else in a different equivalence class. Love can mean something else, a different equivalence class, and equivalence classes can overlap. So it can be very, very complex. And well, that's just what humans are. We're very complex beings. So it's really cool stuff. Stay tuned for more. I will be posting some follow-up test questions so that I can help make sure that this concept is making sense to you. Of course, post in the comments, please, if you have follow-up questions, any other things to add, any examples that maybe you can think of. And then, yeah, I think that's all for now. But stay tuned. Can't wait to talk to you guys more in the next coming week. All right. Bye, everyone.